Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. In today's episode, the customer is always right. Malicious compliance costs company hundreds of millions and their most profitable product. A little light reading. Yep, I must be bad at math since I work here. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. The customer is always right. About 9 years ago, I worked at a food service job within a retail store. This job was absolutely horrible, as I got written up for anything and everything I did. If I took my breaks, write up. If I didn't take my breaks, write up. I called out once with a doctor's note saying that I absolutely could not work, as my illness was highly contagious, write up. This was my first time ever calling out, and I gave 48 hours notice. The second, and last time, was for my grandma's funeral, which I had requested off and was denied. I was written up then too. Any excuse my supervisor could find to write me up, he did. Being in high school at the time, I took this very personally and assumed that I had done something wrong. I worked there for 2 years, taking each write-up as a learning opportunity. However, I finally reached a point where I recognized that it wasn't my fault, and the malicious compliance began. In this job, there were add-ons, and these add-ons came with an upcharge. I had customers complain to me constantly about not wanting to be charged extra, but normally they would just pay it and move on. One customer, however, refused to pay for the add-on, but wanted it anyway. I pointed to the sign which said that it would cost extra, and tried my best to politely explain to her that I can't give it to her without charging her. She demanded to speak to my manager. I happily called the manager over, as at that time the leader was also my area supervisor. Each day there was an overall leader which would cycle, but each department had their own supervisor as well. I'll call him Bob. Bob was employed through the retail store specifically. Regardless, I thought that surely Bob would have my back, as he knows the most about the rules that I had to follow. I was very, very wrong. After listening to the customer, Bob proceeded to yell at me in front of her, stating the customer is always right, and you are not paid to argue with her. Give her what she wants and do not charge her for any of it. He also informed her that I would be written up for this, and I was. From that moment on, whenever a customer complained about having to pay for an add-on, I didn't charge them for it. If they demanded their items for free, stating that they didn't like them or had a bad experience in the past, I gave it to them for free. After all, the customer says that they shouldn't have to pay for it, so who was I to argue? Of course, he meant that I shouldn't argue to the point of the manager being called, but he didn't specify, and I didn't want to be written up for it again, nor did I care to follow a do as I mean, not as I say policy anymore. It didn't take long for the people who worked in the actual retail store to learn that they could also get add-ons for free if they complained about it, as at the time that they were ordering, they were technically customers. Since each add-on cost between 60 cents and $1, and most customers wanted more than one add-on, the company was losing an average of $2 to $3 per transaction on the add-ons alone, not even considering the customers who got their entire order for free. Of course, $2 to $3 doesn't seem like much, but it was enough to catch the attention of my district supervisor, who I will call and was employed by the food service company, and her job was to oversee the branches that were inside retail stores. And was very nice and respected the employees who worked with her company, regardless of if they weren't employed directly by her company, as was my case. She first asked Bob about why our location appeared to be less profitable than other locations, and less profitable than it had been a few months previously. He tried to pin it on me, saying that I was stealing from the company by giving my friends and co-workers free items. And, understanding how serious of an accusation that was, insisted on speaking with me alone. I expected to be fired, but she instead asked me why profits had gone down. I explained to her what Bob had told me about the customer always being right, and how I had gotten written up and didn't want to be written up again, so I followed his instructions word for word. For the first time since starting this job, someone took my side. She agreed that not charging for those add-ons would explain the loss she was seeing, and that how Bob handled the situation was unprofessional and entirely against policy. Having Bob accuse me of stealing to protect himself was my last straw, and I put in my 2 weeks' notice that same day. HR had apparently taken notice to how Bob was treating me, as her exact words were, "It's about time, I'm glad you're finally standing up for yourself." With my consent, she altered some of the dates to make my end date be a week earlier than it should have been since the schedule had not been written yet. To this day I think of her as my guardian angel. Shortly after my last shift, I was informed by my friends that Bob no longer worked there as well, and was so upset with him that she called his supervisor and launched an investigation into his behavior. As it turns out, I was not the only one he would write up without a legitimate reason. They were also incredibly upset that he directly caused an unnecessary loss in profits. He could not blame me for it, as it was his words, and many people corroborated that he had said the same to them at one point or another. I was just the first to maliciously comply with his request, thus bringing his behavior to the attention of someone in a higher position than him. He was fired, effective immediately. Malicious compliance costs company hundreds of millions and their most profitable product. So this is a story from someone I know. I've known this person for years, and while I don't work with them, I've seen this story play out more or less step by step. I know several people involved, but I'm going to tell it from the point of view of the person I know the best. So many years ago, this person, let's just refer to them as person. Person got a really great job working for a Fortune 500 company. Not going to give any more specifics. But the company offered many benefits for their employees. They treated their employees like people and not like numbers. They offered a yearly raise to anyone who worked there. This was meant to do several things. First of all, it was meant to keep up with inflation so that employees wouldn't have to stress about money. I'm sure a lot of you know the struggle, waiting for min wage to be updated so you can start saving money to hold over till the next wage increase. No, the company was ahead of the curve. On top of that, when they did start hiring new employees for more, they increased the wage of anyone with that specific position by the same amount to keep older employees from earning less than newer employees. They offered many other benefits as well. Basically an awesome place to work for. Unfortunately, it's a small town and the company wanted to expand that specific branch of operations. They couldn't do it here, so they chose to move out. They sold the branch office building along with the product that person worked to another smaller company. When it was sold, then person went with it. The old company made the new company sign a contract which guaranteed that the yearly bonus would stay around along with several other similar benefits. New company wasn't around very long and ended up expanding as well. They did the same thing, sold the location and product to another company. Unfortunately, they didn't care as much about their employees and only treated them well because of contractual obligations. So when they sold the location and product, it did not come with a contract. New company did care a little bit about employees, but ended raises and all of that. They would listen to employee complaints, but that was about it. They weren't around long either before the scummiest company came in and bought them out. So new company comes in and buys them out and immediately starts changing policies and shifting everything up to make everyone's jobs harder. Person and their team members got used to it and kept going. Now here's the thing about person. Person works on a team of specialists. There are only about 12 people on the team and a manager that's over them. Well, there was, I'll get to that. This team doesn't require any special education or anything, but it does require a several-week training course and several months of acclimation. The product is extremely delicate, and the customers for this product are extremely demanding. They more or less require perfection, anything short and no money. You must watch every single word that you say to these customers, or they might write you off permanently. However, this is an extremely valuable product and the company makes a lot of money from it. Or they did at least. Let's speed forward about 10 to 15 years. The company has only found new ways to treat their employees less like humans since they took over and are somehow getting away with it. Turnover is high, but as long as they have high school grads looking for a job, then they can keep their building full. Unfortunately, Person and their team have asked for a raise several times at this point. They were always being turned down because they are earning at market value for their position. Looked it up, and market value is determined by a simple equation that takes into account other people in your profession at your experience level and with your job title within about 100 miles and calculates average wage for them. Considering the extreme specialty of this position and being located in a remote region, market value is determined by calculating the average wage of everyone on Person's team. Basically, the company was saying, "Shut up, we aren't giving you a raise." Now, something to understand: Person and their team members weren't that disappointed not to get a raise every year. However, they were now making only a little more than a new hire with the company, and there are other companies that do similar but less specialized work in the area but start people out at with a higher wage than Person is making at this point. I literally knew high school grads with zero work experience that made more than Person did. Now at this point, Person has about 20 plus years of experience working this specific product. And the least experienced person on their team had been working it for 12 plus years. The straw that broke the camel's back was an annual investors meeting that was streamed live to the entire company. Person, working on a small team, was invited to take a few hours off to watch the meeting. It was kind of a reward for them for performing so well. The company shot themselves in the foot with this one, though it was already starting to go south anyways. They just sped it up a little. So to put this into perspective for you guys, the company total profit for that year, profit not earnings, was a little over 1.2 billion. Out of that 1.2 billion, Person's team of 12 people, in a company hiring tens of thousands, mind you, these 12 people, and a manager, brought in about 480 million. That's a little over a third of the company's total profits for the entire year. For those that don't like math, that's about 40 million per person of pure profit. Person specifically earned a little over 60 million alone. The lowest earner on the team was over 20 million. Seeing that they were single-handedly responsible for over a third of the company's total profit for the year, the entire team got together and demanded a raise. The manager actually put that in before they even said anything. Even their manager thought it was wrong. They demanded $20 an hour. They actually only wanted half of that, but since they were being lowballed and completely unappreciated by the company for the work that they did, they put in a higher number. By the way, $10 is about the amount they would have been making with their yearly bonus had it never been discontinued. As you might expect, the company, being money hungry, came back with the same response as usual, didn't even try to negotiate. They asked several more times over the course of a few weeks, threatening to quit if they didn't get a raise, and the company basically just said, "Go on, anyone can do your job." Malicious compliance. They didn't all quit, only 3 of the 12, which if you've been keeping up would add up to on average $120 million over 1 year. But that's not all. Actually, what they did ended up turning out even worse for the company. The rest of the team all agreed to only work their minimum requirements. The company had minimum requirements that everyone had to meet. This team, up to this point, being proud of the work they put in, consistently exceeded the requirements many times over. They would compete to see who could perform the best. The lowest earner on this team often exceeded minimum requirements by 3 times over. At the end of the year, the company had to painfully explain to investors why their highest earning department was now performing at less than half what it did the previous year. They came up with some stupid explanations. They still refused to give a raise though. Instead, what they decided to do was raise their minimum requirements. At first the team kept up, but eventually, out of aggravation when their constant requests for a raise were denied, about half of the team requested transfer off. They were transferred to other deps and replaced with brand new employees, the most experienced of which had been with this company for about a year. These new employees struggled to keep up with the minimum requirements, which kept getting raised to meet stockholder expectations. Eventually, original member on the team had either quit or transferred to another department, even the manager. This left the team with only new employees who had absolutely no idea what they were doing. They completely alienated the vast majority of their former customers almost overnight, and if that wasn't enough, because they could not meet the extremely high demands of the company, still only a fraction of what the original team was performing, they were either let go or transferred to another department and replaced after only a few months on the team. Even hiring several times, the number of employees on that team did nothing. When they reported an earnings of $80 million from that team, the company got so fed up with it that they just sold the product to another company for an enormous loss. Unfortunately, this isn't one of those "the company drove themselves out of business" stories, but I still think it's pretty funny and I like to tell it to all of my new friends. I also use it to warn anyone who might be considering going to this company to work. Honestly, you'd think that if someone earns that much profit for your company, you'd at least try to keep them around. A little light reading. About 10 or so years ago, I started in a new job that is quite technical, with lots of technical reference documents that are updated regularly. My manager was the type of guy who would expect his staff to work that little bit extra each day and would make snide comments about you if you had the audacity to leave work on time. Company policy states that if we did work overtime, it had to be submitted within 30 days or it would be denied. He loved being the bearer of bad news if someone missed that deadline. And all overtime had to be approved prior by management. Anyway, at my yearly review, he mentioned it wouldn't hurt if I took home a document or two to read over weekends. Confirming just an hour a night of light reading would be quite beneficial. He even noted this as a development opportunity in my review. So I followed his recommendation and would read for an hour each night before bed. He took pleasure in reminding me about it in front of coworkers and smugly praising me for finally listening to him. Then, just before the 30-day deadline, I submitted my overtime of 1 hour each night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, for the last 4 weeks. He was furious, but knew there was nothing he could do as it was documented in my review. I was directed to do my reading during business hours. After that. The kicker? Company policy also states overtime not merged with my normal work hours is paid at a minimum of 4 hours pay at overtime rates. Meaning I got 7 hours pay for every hour I read each night. Quite lucrative in the end. Yep, I must be bad at math since I work here. This was many years ago and probably not quite the right sub, but whatever. I worked for one of those big box stores that helps you improve your home. This guy would come in every week and buy 3 cases of cheap spray paint. I asked him what he did with that much paint. He worked at an apartment complex and handed those to his crew, and they'd spot spray any chipped paint they found. What a lot of people don't realize is those cans only look the same on the outside. That cheap can only covered 5 square feet. The more expensive covered 15 square feet. The cheap can was $1 and the expensive was $2.50. So I told him one day he could save money by buying 1 case of the expensive rather than 3 of the cheap. He yelled at me that $2.50 was more than $1. I tried to explain it had 3 times the paint for less than 3 times the cost. He wasn't having any of my funny math. So I told him, "Thanks for your business, sir." Every week he came in, I told him, "Thanks for your business." If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.